Good evening, friends. Welcome to India Power Talk. India Power Talk is a knowledge sharing initiative. We invite international thought leaders and domain experts to share their insights, experiences, and strategies related to business and the economy. The great thinker and humanist Buckminster Fuller said in one of the world's most quotable quotes, think global, act local. And this is exactly what our topic today is all about. Utah, America's newest economic powerhouse. Our guest today is extremely experienced and with high credentials to provide deep insights into these topics. Miles Hansen, President and CEO of the World Trade Center, Utah. So, welcome, Miles. Good evening, and thank you for joining us on my India Power Talk.
Thank you, Nitin, very much for the opportunity. And first off, let me say congratulations. Over the past year and a half during this pandemic, it's been a very challenging time for many of us. But as we've seen, we've all had to figure out how to adapt and innovate and overcome. And I think India Power Talks is a great example how you were able to take, despite the challenges of the pandemic, see that there would be a need for these types of virtual interactions. And here I am in the morning in Salt Lake City. You are in New Delhi in the evening time. And we have an opportunity to engage, to learn from each other. And you're creating this great content for your audience. And so again, congratulations. Thank you for the opportunity. You know, I talked to Ron Gunnell yesterday, who you've had on, and Franz Kolb is a good friend of mine. So I'd encourage anybody, if they have missed, if they haven't seen your session with Ron and Franz, go and check that out, because they're going to have great perspectives on Utah and the United States as well. But anyways, thank you, Nitin, very much for the opportunity.
Miles, to begin with, would you share a little of your background? How did you arrive at the Department of State? How did you develop your unique combination of public and private sector work?
And so I grew up in Utah. I had very little international experience. I'd been to, I think, Victoria, British Columbia, right across the border of Washington State into Canada, and Tijuana, just across the border from San Diego and Mexico. But otherwise, no international experience. I finished high school, and I chose to serve as a missionary for my church. And I got asked to go to Russia. And so I went to St. Petersburg, Russia as an 18-year-old, spent 2 years, learned Russian, had this incredible international experience. That was really my first time in another culture, in another environment. I felt like I was totally unprepared. But when I got there, and after 2 years, you kind of figure things out. You gain a very deep appreciation for other countries and cultures. I developed this language ability with Russian. So I came back, studied university here in Utah. Ended up studying international relations, and I got asked. I had to do an international internship, and there was a girl that I kind of liked, and she was going to do an internship in Geneva, Switzerland. And so I said, that sounds like a lot of fun. I probably want to do the same program. Lo and behold, they didn't find me an internship in Switzerland, but they found one for me in Kyrgyzstan. And so I went and I spent several months living and working in Kyrgyzstan. And then I traveled elsewhere in Central Asia. And that really was my first experience in Muslim countries. And this was a few years after 9/11. And what I experienced was so different from what I'd seen on the news. So I came back to Brigham Young University, started studying Farsi. That took me back to Tajikistan to do a year-long Farsi program. And then from there, ended up going to graduate school in Washington, D.C. And I did a program where the State Department paid for my graduate school in exchange for a service commitment. And so you see this very direct line from being from Utah, living in Russia for 2 years, doing these internships, and then developing these language skills, initially Russian and Farsi. And that took me to the State Department, where I had an opportunity to work on Iran for several years, from Dubai and Armenia. And I spent some time in Washington, D.C. doing some counterterrorism work, back in Saudi Arabia. I learned a little Arabic on the way, and then ultimately back working at the White House on Middle East issues before I came back here to Utah to work at World Trade Center, Utah.
Great. What a fascinating journey, Miles. Truly fascinating. Utah occupies a special position as one of the most economically successful U.S. states. Now, could you please dwell upon how has this been possible, and what do you think were the main contributing factors?
So if we were the best economy in the nation before the pandemic, that's certainly true now. I mean, there are some parts of the state that have an unemployment rate of less than 2%. The state overall is less than 3%. And so that just shows how strong the economy is. And in fact, we have some challenges related to this growth. And the reason why, in my mind, you can boil it down into three primary factors. One, starting with kind of a government perspective, here we don't believe that government drives economic growth, but government certainly can create a framework. And in Utah, we have a very unique approach to politics. And here we have a very constructive approach to politics. And we have politics like anywhere. The mayor of Salt Lake City is typically a Democrat. The governor is almost always a Republican. We have a legislature that plays very active and plays a very strong role. And so you get the same political process. But what I've noticed is, as policies go through this political process, the policies that come out are almost always better than what either side started with. So you see this constructive political environment, and what that allows us to do is to be very pragmatic, to solve problems, to create this framework of collaboration in which the private sector can really thrive. Another one is we have just an incredible, innovative workforce. We have the youngest workforce anywhere in the country. We have this great universities. We have this belief here in Utah as part of our DNA that we can go out and do anything. And so as I'm interacting with companies all day, every day, it's fascinating because you'll have small little companies that have the same combination of vision for global influence and success, as well as that grit and willingness to work very, very hard. And you put those two things together and you end up with these companies that are just doing incredible things, and they operate within this government framework to be very successful. And then the last factor, very quickly, is how globally minded people here in Utah are. We speak 130 languages, more than anywhere else in the nation. We have more people who have lived in other countries per capita than anywhere else in the country. There is a tradition of young people leaving home right after school to go live in other parts of the United States and other countries to gain a greater appreciation. They then come back, just like me, changed and having a very strong desire to engage with the rest of the world.
Which are the industries and service sectors that have developed so far ahead of the national average?
Yep, that's right. It's interesting. And if you look back 30 or 40 years, Utah's economy was very much dominated by extracting natural resources. But now we have the most diversified economy in the United States. And so what that means is we are succeeding in virtually every industry, very diverse economy, but just a few key are aerospace and defense. We also have a very, very strong healthcare innovation or life science industry. The third that I'll mention is software and IT. And then finally, I'll mention last, just a great collection of consumer product companies.
Could you please talk about the World Trade Center, Utah, and its activities? And I'm more curious to know, Miles, from you, because I know WTC is very active, and under your leadership, it has been doing a lot of stuff these days.
Yeah, so World Trade Center Utah is a private organization. We are one of 330 World Trade Centers all around the world. And in fact, we've done quite a bit of work with World Trade Center Mumbai, which is our partner organization. And so we, as a World Trade Center, we exist to try to, the tagline is to make doing business around the world as easy as it is to do it across the street. And so we work hard at building this great global network and great expertise with our partners around the world. And then we take that and we focus it in to figure out how do we accelerate growth for Utah companies and for the companies that we're working with in different parts of the world. Again, our purpose is to help companies increase their international sales, attract investment where that's helpful. And then in the process, we're just out there helping our partners around the world recognize Utah as a global hub for trade and investment and international business.
How does the World Trade Center Utah maintains its global connections, A? And B, what are your future plans, if I may ask you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are constantly interacting with our partners across the state of Utah and around the world. And as we're doing that, we are very, very deliberate to say we need to be building partnerships. For a partnership to work, it has to be mutually beneficial. It has to be grounded on action and activity. This benefits both sides. And it's just a standard networking process. But we want to make sure we have very strong networks with our partners around the world. And we do that by making sure that we are very active in engaging with our partners and potential partners, and B, that they can trust us as an organization that is focused on action and generating value for both sides.
Miles, you recently held a virtual trade mission with the World Trade Center, Mumbai, I guess, where you connected more than 100 Utah companies to potential partners, Indian partners. You connected them with Indian government officials, economic experts. I mean, if I may ask you, what impressions do you have about economic opportunity, and how do you plan to move forward in the coming months, and maybe or in the years, to build a stronger trade and investment ties between India and Utah? And you can be as critical as possible.
First off, India is such a tremendous country, so much human capital, such a large market, and it is growing very, very quickly. And there's no question about that. And that India's time to be a global leader, particularly on economic issues, is arriving, and maybe in some ways has arrived. And so as I sit back from the World Trade Center Utah perspective, what that means to me is that we have to be focusing in on really understanding the Indian market, building out our network of partners there, helping to communicate that to our Utah companies. I think typically in the past, when you talk to many Utah companies about India, and they recognize the potential, but there are a lot of regulatory issues. It can be difficult bureaucratically. You have some corruption issues that have been in different parts of India in the past, and a market that in many ways is fragmented. And so for a company here that is looking at the Indian market, it can be challenging. It can be a little scary. There can be a lot of obstacles. And what I view our role is to really make sure that we understand that market so that we can help reduce the obstacles for Utah companies, either to sell into the Indian market, to produce in India, to sell in India, to produce in India, to sell elsewhere in the region or around the world. And so you mentioned very briefly, wrapping up, the virtual trade mission to India that we did last summer. And we had the opportunity to partner with the U.S. Embassy in New Delhi, with World Trade Center Mumbai, with IBM. We had the chief economist of IBM join us, as well as the development commissioner for the provincial government around Mumbai, to provide a bit of a broader perspective. But it was so important to have these different perspectives from a U.S. embassy perspective, from a World Trade Center perspective, a provincial government perspective, and then this great IBM, a great global company perspective. And we used all of that to help our Utah companies gain a deeper appreciation about how to do business in India. And then following that, we had many people who wanted to follow up, have additional conversations, companies that are now pursuing business opportunities. And I see that trend continuing and accelerating, which is why us connecting is so important, and why this is going to be an area of focus moving forward for World Trade Center Utah.
India is the home of a lot of family companies, a lot of startups, a lot of small companies. How do you think? How do you really think that the state of Utah, or the businesses from the state of Utah, and we in India could help them grow, or help them collaborate with each other?
If, in any country, startups and family businesses are often the backbone of the economy. And what we find is they typically start as being, local companies, but then over time they grow. And after a while, they can become some of the largest, most influential businesses, and again, continue to be the bedrock of the economy, not just a small, but then they go to medium and then very large multinational corporations. They all can be, family businesses. And so the key then is to focus in on how do you help them go from the startup phase that you mentioned and grow to become very large and successful companies. And so what we have found in Utah, is we're working with our companies here, but also with companies elsewhere, is these family-owned businesses and these startups often have very similar values. They want to grow, they want to succeed, they want to innovate, They are lean and they are hungry and they are highly motivated. And so the challenge is oftentimes they are so focused on getting the business going and focusing on that business that sometimes it's hard for them to take a step back and look at the bigger picture,
Yes.
to try to see, greater
Right.
market opportunities. And that's what we find ourselves doing a lot, is saying, hey, to the business owner, you're working so hard to make it work. It's like you're doing 5 different jobs and you're working around the clock and you're trying to make payroll. Let us come in and just spend a little bit of time understanding your business. You keep focusing on growing your business, but let us go and try to find some market opportunities. Let us go in a very low cost or distraction to the business, help you put together a market entry strategy, and then let us go and line up some meetings to see if we can't help you break into another market. And what we find in the United States, and I'm confident it's true around the world, is that companies that are engaging in international trade grow faster,
Yes.
create jobs quicker. If anybody who's listening is interested in learning more about what we do, they can go to our website, wtcutah.com. We've got some great information there.
I cannot possibly leave you without asking you to dwell upon the withdrawal of international coalition forces from Afghanistan. And this situation is, I guess, very fluid and worrying. And as an expert and with the experience in the region, how do you see things unfolding? And secondly, what do you think international community needs to do to achieve some degree of stability? And I'm asking you this question because you have a terrific experience of that region.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. It's such a difficult issue. I know people all around the world have had a wide range of emotions over the past few months as we've seen this incredible human tragedy and national security failure taking place in Afghanistan. And it makes me think back to the time that I spent a little bit of time in Afghanistan. When my wife and I were living in Dushanbe, Tajikistan, studying Farsi as students, and we wanted to go get some firsthand experience in the country before I knew that I would be working as a policy maker and as a diplomat, and that Afghanistan would be part of the issue set that I was working on. And so we traveled across the northern part of the country and just had an incredible experience. And so my heart has really been breaking over the past couple of months as I think back to the wonderful people that we had the opportunity to interact with. I have been deeply critical of the Biden administration because they have framed this as an issue of either we stay in Afghanistan forever or things play out the way they have over the past few months, which is a false choice that completely rejects the common sense approach to having a very simple plan, but a focused plan to manage a transition that would give the Afghan government the greatest opportunity to thrive, as well as making sure that we could have avoided this just absolutely heart-wrenching human tragedy that's unfolded over the past few weeks. And the way that this should have happened is not that difficult. It's like, okay, if you want to end the combat role, first off, you need to get all the heavy equipment out. I've seen reports that talk about $80 billion, a billion with a B, of equipment that the United States has left in Afghanistan, and now the Taliban has control over. Very sophisticated equipment. So the plan should have been get the equipment out first, get the civilians out, both American citizens, enable other countries, India included, to get their citizens out, and then to make sure that we fulfill our moral obligation to the Afghans that worked with us for 20 years and now are in extreme danger. Get the civilians out first, and then after you've accomplished that, then you figure out how do you support the Afghan army through a period of transition to then pull out.
Miles, this has been fascinating talk, and I really sincerely thank you for your valuable time early morning today, for your time and spending so much time to elaborate issues. Now, would you like to make any closing comments, Miles?
I just like to say thank you to you. You are a great example of the way that we can build bridges of friendship, of partnership, of communication, sharing knowledge between partners. And here we are. If you think about a globe right now, and this has become we're all used to doing Zoom calls and everything, but just take a second to think about the fact that we are literally on opposite sides of the earth right now. having this very comfortable, natural conversation, and that you are going to send this out to all of your closest friends that are viewers and listeners to your India Power Talk series, and that's just incredible. And you have built these bridges of information flows and partnership and friendship, and that then creates so much opportunity for us to work together, for people who listen in to connect with us. And as we share this with our network, for our companies to connect with you and others, and there is great productivity increases that comes from what you're working on. And that really truly does lead to success for companies, which creates jobs, which creates more prosperity, which it has a leavening effect on our communities, our states, our nations, and the world. And so what you're doing is so important. So it's just been an honor to spend some time with you. So grateful for the opportunity to connect. And I look forward to this just being, the first chapter of an active partnership where we can go and try to take this conversation and facilitate positive action that wouldn't have occurred had we not had the chance to meet and spend some time together today.
I just cannot, agree more with you, Miles. And it has been such a fantastic association and conversation with you, with Ron Gunel, with Ashok Joshi. He has been instrumental in organizing these talks, helping me to connect the right people in state of Utah. Not only that, but guiding me and driving us to the right direction. So thank you once again, Miles, for your valuable time and insights. It has been a great pleasure talking to you. I would like to thank the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce as well as the Indian Chamber of Commerce, Wadhwani Foundation, LawSico, and the India SME Accelerator Network. Let me conclude with the humble prayer to the Almighty to bestow mankind with the right spirit to fight the coronavirus, whatever balance it is now, and help restore peace, prosperity, and well-being. Thank you, Miles.
Thank you very much.